So again, just to begin for the recording, we're a little early here before everyone's here, but what I've asked is that folks use the whiteboard in front of them to fill in the blank. What is a barrier to online proctored exams? So welcome, and Sophie, please mute your mic for now, Ruth. The bottom you should see a little microphone, perfect. We're waiting for everyone. Thank you for coming in early, but I have an activity in front of you actually to begin our webinar. We've already started recording, and that is I've asked a question. If you look at the very top of the slide that says fill in the blank, what is one barrier to online proctored exams? And this is a whiteboard in front of you, and so if you use the text tool there at the top, everyone has started writing things in. What are some barriers to online proctored exams? And you can, if you want to get creative, you can use the pencil and try different colors. It's up to you. Part of what I like to do about trainings is to also teach about the modalities that we're using for the training. So hopefully some of you will also learn how to now use the whiteboard in Blackboard Collaborate if you've never done it. But Gary, welcome.
Okay, I get it now. I was on mute. Thank you.
Hi, Gary. We have already begun. We're a little bit early, so we're just waiting for everyone to get in, but so glad you're here early. We're actually already doing an activity to get ourselves thinking about the topic for this webinar. And in front of you, you'll see a kind of shaded off red pink whiteboard. And I've asked a question to everyone, which is to write on the whiteboard, fill in the blank. What is one barrier to online proctored exams? And so if you use the little text icon in the top left-hand corner of your screen, you can type an answer to that question on our Blackboard. And those of you who already put one in, you are more than happy to put another one in. I imagine some of you already have. Maybe even if you agree with one of them, you could kind of second that idea, right, in bold. I love it. Someone is using the underline pencil tool. Great. And it's okay if our whiteboard gets a little messy, right? That happens when we're in face-to-face classes too. At least with me, my students are always saying my handwriting is a little bit all over the place. So, but I imagine the person who put the lines above still not completely cheat-proof was sort of emphasizing that. Yes, great. Again, you guys can use different colors, and you can please add to this question. What is one barrier to online proctored exams that you've experienced or that you know about? Dennis, I see you're now with us. If you haven't answered that question, please use the text tool and go ahead and add to our whiteboard here.
Hi, could you repeat the question? I stepped away.
Sure. Do you see a screen in front of you?
Yes, I do.
Okay, the question's at the very top. I know it's hidden. There's a lot on this slide. It says fill in the blank. What's one barrier to online proctored exams?
Okay, thanks.
Great. And you may want to mute your mic while you're typing, Dennis. I know I always forget to do that sometimes, and then everyone hears me typing. But if you added that one at the end, that's an excellent one, and we're going to talk about these once it's 3 o'clock, right? Students with special needs, so accessibility concerns. Yep. Richard, welcome. So a number of folks got in a little early, and what we're doing, we've already started an activity where I've asked everyone to fill in the blank. One barrier to online proctored exams is what in your experience? And if you use the little text tool at the very top, this is a whiteboard in front of us, you can add to our whiteboard or emphasize other points that have already been made.
Did that come through?
Yeah, if you wrote, did you write cheating?
Security is what I wrote. Same thing.
Security, no, that has not come through. So maybe try it again. Sometimes if you're using like I notice if I'm using an iPad, things function a little differently.
Yeah, I'm using a computer, so I select the T text.
Yeah, and then move your arrow over to the kind of pinkish whiteboard I have going on here, and pick a space, and it should open up a little text box.
Oh, I see. Yes, I didn't have that open.
Great. You can pick different colors. So for those of you who just arrived, looks like Christine, Duke, Erica, several of you, Sandy, hello. We have already kind of begun a precognitive activity where I've asked you guys a question. Fill in the blank. One barrier to online proctored exams is what? And we're using the whiteboard here to answer this question. We will be using the chat and other parts of Blackboard Collaborate a little bit later, but the whiteboard is what I'd like to use for this discussion. What I hope you're going to see in a lot of our self-learning trainings this week is we're going to be using the very technology, and we may be talking about a different topic, but we'll want to also teach you how to use the technology. So for those of you who have never used the whiteboard function in Blackboard Collaborate, now you're getting to see how to do it. And so we'll wait about 1 more minute just so we make sure to catch anyone who's coming in a little bit late. Oh, thank you, Christine, for that feedback. I'll let Colin know. We will be sending some feedback forms.
Jamie, I still don't see the box to respond with.
Is that Robert speaking, or is that someone else?
Richard?
Oh, Richard. I'm sorry. Well, guess what? We're going to have to figure that out later. We'll have to ask some e-learning staff because, as I said, even though this session isn't about exactly how to use Blackboard Collaborate, I would encourage you now to maybe take the webinar on Blackboard Collaborate. But
Richard, are you doing both of the clicks? Because you have to click on the T for text, and then you have to click in the pink box. Did you click in the pink box too?
I think I did. I clicked the T for text. I selected the color blue.
Oh, right after the T for text, go down to the pink box and then click and you'll see a white box.
Okay, I'm not seeing a pink box.
Oh, it's a white box within the pink. Sorry, I know you probably need to go ahead, Jamie.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
I'd try and help, sorry.
Well, guess what, Richard? This is good. You're problem solving how to use the whiteboard function. So, which, as Christine said, the webinar earlier today on Blackboard Collaborate was helpful. Sandy, I see your hand up. I'll answer the question and then I want to get moving, but I do see your hand up. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
No, I was running into the same thing and I clicked on the pink box and now I've got this white strip on the side, but I'm still not real sure how to write, but don't worry about it. I'm fine without it.
Then you just start typing. When you see the white box, you start typing.
Okay, I see a red box instead of pink. And I clicked on that and I got a white box and I just typed security and I see it now in blue. Can you see it?
Yes, yes. Now you need to hit enter. Hit enter.
I did.
Well, I'm going to have to, but I do appreciate you guys giving this a try. So let's go ahead and start beginning because I actually think what's happening here is one of the examples on the whiteboard here, which is technological glitches, technology issues, right? So look at all these on the whiteboard already with what you guys have mentioned about barriers to online proctored exams. Not necessarily cheat-proof, cheating, technology issues, validity, tests from DG. I'm not sure what a DG is, but maybe that person can jump in and let us know. Students who miss the time slot, yep, so the limitations and the accessibility relating to timing. Do we actually even have people to proctor? It's a big challenge we had in the spring with ProctorU, not even having enough staff given the onslaught of work orders that they received. Someone mentioned, a student commented the proctoring was noisy and distracting. Well, then that defeats it. So cost, definitely. Someone put on here the cost, and who pays for that cost, right? Is it the student? Is it the institution? And then how should, how much is too much? So, I wanted to start off this activity, as I said, to one, show you how to use the whiteboard in Collaborate Ultra, but more to actually get y'all sharing the challenges that you've had with online proctored exams. And you mentioned a bunch of them, and I'm going to start off by sharing some more that the research even national discussion about online proctored exams has shared. So I'm going to move away from this screen and move us to the next slide here. So barriers to online proctored exams. Well, guess what? You guys nailed it with the first ones, right? Problems with tech and hardware. Limited internet connectivity and bandwidth. So no one mentioned that, but I'm sure some of you have had that experience, or I heard that in one of the Blackboard Collaborate Ultra sessions this morning. Blackboard internet, VSU's internet went out a little bit this morning, right? So that's always a challenge with technology. Sandy, I see your hand up. Would you like to jump in with another barrier?
Well, my hand is not meant to be up, sorry.
Oh, okay. So you can put your hand down if you click the button again.
I got it. Okay, sorry. Duh.
And we will, don't worry. So problems with tech hardware. So what about increased workload and frustration for faculty as they try to resolve the tech issues? I see our e-learning help desk tickets that come in, and wow, I have seen so many tickets from faculty who are, y'all are doing a great job trying to help your student with the tech issues. And then guess what? It's an email chain of 4 days of work, right? So that becomes very frustrating and time consuming. Several of you mentioned cheating, right? Potential for academic dishonesty. And, you know, I'm going to jump to the boxes on the bottom before I go back to the middle, but, you know, so someone wrote about accessibility. So actually, a lot of research shows that online proctored exams exacerbate existing inequities in higher education. And I'm not just talking about students with learning disabilities, but actually race and gender and socioeconomic levels. So there's research showing that online proctored exams continue to increase the gender gap in education or our racial inequities. So that's something pretty serious for us as an institution that serves students from very diverse backgrounds to consider. No one mentioned this, so these are new things for y'all to think about throughout our webinar today, but a lot of the research shows that actually exams can often have a poor correlation to student learning and intelligence. They aren't always measuring the learning outcomes that we desire. So some of you might be like, that's going to be a big topic that we're going to discuss throughout the webinar today. And then last, but I would say definitely not least, and you've probably seen this with your students, but they provoke a lot of stress and anxiety. And, you know, it is good for us to be stressed and have anxiety. It's a way to achieve goals and to move forward in a lot of challenging situations. But is the level of stress necessary, especially maybe during COVID or something like that, when we have a lot of other serious stressors in our life? So there are a lot of barriers to online proctored exams. That does not mean they still don't serve a lot of good purposes, and we're going to talk about those as well today. Let's see, I just want to make sure. Okay, I saw a chat from someone. I want to make sure I didn't miss that. So I know you might be feeling like, oh my gosh, okay, so there's so many barriers. How are we going to overcome them? Well, that's what we're going to do today in this webinar. We have already begun to recognize the barriers to online proctored exams. We are going to now try to solve them or overcome them by better aligning our learning objectives with formative and summative assessments. We're going to identify alternative assessments for culminating a unit or a course. And by the end of today, you're even going to start designing a new assessment for student learning online. So I'm really hoping that by the end of today, you come away with some real solutions to overcoming these barriers with online proctored exams. So here's some more interaction now. I want you guys to consider an online proctored exam in one of your courses. What's your purpose for giving that exam? So Christine jumped in already and started using the chat. I see Duke, you did too. So now's the chance. Now I want you guys to use the chat. What's your this question? What's your purpose when you've given an exam like that? Please answer in the chat or raise your hand and then share aloud. So Christine said to make sure students do the reading. So Christine, you mean recall then?
Yeah, recall and making sure that they know the key terms in each philosopher.
Okay. So understanding of concepts. Okay, Sandy says to actually make them do the reading. Almost like an attendance, I do that sometimes with my assessments.
No, actually I meant just get them to engage with what's going on in class, because they sort of exist, but they don't really engage unless the threat of a test is there.
Okay, so actually just to have an assessment, yeah, to just have some kind of assessment for an outcome. Okay, Duke. So Duke, and feel free, you guys, jump like Sandy did, jump in and unmute yourself if you want to share a little more. Duke says linking, connecting concepts. So Duke, that's more than just recall. What do you mean by that?
I teach a lot of theater management courses, and everything is connected, and trying to get them to look beyond a single bullet point on a PowerPoint or a single bolded word in a text to how they relate to the others around them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so you're making connections. Basically, you're going beyond recall and kind of doing comparisons and contrast.
Yes.
Sounds like. Yeah.
Yes.
Great. Donna says, have students practice editing and understanding how sentences work. So that's recall and application. So what she's talking about is it's not just a student kind of defining what a now here I'm going to like butcher grammar. What's a concept in grammar, Donna? What's one concept that you teach them?
So for instance, if we're talking about punctuation and how to punctuate compound sentences or complex sentences, they not only have to give examples of compound and complex sentences, but I'll have passages where they have to find errors. And so it won't be there's an error in this sentence. It'll be there's some errors in this passage, correct them.
Awesome. Okay, so they're evaluating, right? They're evaluating the sentence for its errors and then maybe how to create new, better sentences, potentially.
They're correcting them, yeah.
Correcting them. Okay, cool. Richard, understanding of course content. So Richard, what do you mean by understanding? And you can unmute your mic if you want.
To have an understanding of the basic interrelationships of concepts, very important. Understanding the basic conceptual framework that I present in the course.
Okay. So it sounds like you might be doing a little bit what Duke is mentioning. It's more than just understanding, but actual like comparing and contrasting and making connections.
Yeah, the course changes as we progress. I lay out the foundation in the first few weeks, and then it's more application beyond that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I see Shalise also has mentioned application. Shalise, can you share in theater or costume? Like, how does an online exam? Yeah, go ahead and share. Well, you lowered your hand, but do you mind sharing? Okay.
Yeah. So, I teach a basic construction class where we learn how to use a machine and make buttonholes, and then the test is a construction of the garment. So I'm checking to see if all the skills that we have learned, how to put seams together, how to do a dart, how to do plackets, and then the test is, can you construct this garment, with some help, because it's sewing and it's hard, but that's the test. And I'm like, how in the heck am I going to do that?
Great. So application, and I see Ruth said that as well. Clinical, if Ruth might be in more of a medical field, and Shalise is in theater, art, and design. Does anyone want to share one more kind of purpose, if you have, we haven't covered it yet, that you use for when you give that exam? We've covered a lot. Dennis, you wrote to try something new. What do you mean by that?
There we go, audio. Normally I give multiple choice exams, and they may cheat, I don't know. I do have colleagues who say they don't care if their students cheat as long as they understand the concept even for a day. Perhaps they're more mature than I am.
So what's the trying new? That you just want them to try learning your material with multiple choice exams? That's what I'm not understanding.
Some of my colleagues give an exam for a certain time slot, and that's it. I usually don't do that. I'll give them a couple of days to take the exam and get it to me. I'm eager to try a certain time slot because I think it may minimize cheating, but maybe not.
Okay. Well, we'll get into that a little more. I'm still a little unclear, but I think our activities, which will include using a worksheet, is going to get into this. So I'm now going to ask you guys a question that I don't want you to answer aloud. Okay, I'm going to go to my next slide. And oops, no, that's not the slide I want. Okay, I guess I don't have a slide. So this is me just asking you. No, this is the slide I wanted. Apologies for that. Yes, this is the right slide. So here's a question now that I want you to think to yourself and answer, but don't tell me. Which levels of learning, according to Bloom's taxonomy, do you want your students to achieve by the end of the unit and course in which you give that online exam? So several of you already in your comments mentioned these. Maybe if you did or did not know Bloom's taxonomy. But now I want everyone to kind of go up on this little pyramid here and find the one that is really aligning with your purpose for that exam. Think yourself. Just be quiet for a little bit here while you think. Okay, so we're going to now really kind of go into this a little more. But I want to, before we kind of really get down to your exact exams, I want to take a little bit of a bigger picture here and potentially a finding that you're realizing that maybe the exam you give isn't really measuring what you want your students to learn. I think it might in many of the cases you guys shared, but maybe some of you it may not be actually measuring what you want. For instance, if you did want students to think critically, right, to compare and contrast, to make connections, all those kinds of things, to analyze and evaluate, then your test, your exam needs to go beyond recall, which as we see here on Bloom's taxonomy is the lowest level of learning and what actually traditionally designed exams only assess. So, so just have that food for thought right now, that if you actually do want your students by the end of your semester or the end of that unit to be able to analyze and evaluate, then sometimes if your exam isn't designed correctly, it may not actually assess that or measure that. So keep that in mind. Kevin Gannon is a professor of history at Grand Valley University. He's director of the teaching center there. He's very renowned in the world of pedagogy. You can't see in that picture, but he actually has tattoos all over himself. He's known as the tattooed professor, and he has a blog where he shares a lot of his insight, and he's published a couple of books recently, one on the radical hope of teaching, which I still need to read. But he published an interesting higher chronicle ed advice column about 2 years ago, and if you look in the left of the screen, you see he called it, "What is the purpose of final exams anyway?" Right? He's pretty provocative. And he says at one point in that column, in the advice column, which I pulled out here in this quote, which is, "What is the purpose of final exams? Sure, a high-stakes summative assessment, one that students complete in the same compressed time frame as 3 or 4 other assessments of the same nature, might measure student learning. More likely," he says, in my experience, "it shows A, which students are tired, stressed, sick, or overwhelmed, and B, which ones are good at taking tests. And good test takers haven't necessarily mastered the material." Keep that in mind. In other words, the question that Gannon encourages fellow faculty to ask, in which you should ask yourself today, is an exam the best way to assess if, what, and how much learning has occurred in your course? Again, think of all the barriers we mentioned at the very beginning about a proctored online exam, and then this very provocative question by Kevin Gannon. It's really often what our students are getting out of an exam is more stress, sickness, and just becoming good test takers. Is that really getting at our assessment? I'm sorry, Dennis, I missed your hand raised. Do you want to ask a question? I know you just put it down, but.
I just wanted to say, I once worked at a school which required that every final exam be cumulative. Apparently, too many professors were not giving any exam or were doing something like 10-question true or false exams. I have no dog in this fight, but I just thought I'd bring it up.
Yeah, well, and VSU doesn't have that university-wide policy, although maybe some of your departments do have sort of to keep consistency among maybe like the intro course, some of those standards. But what would Gannon's response be to that, Dennis? What would he think about that policy?
I think he would probably ask the professors to really think hard about what their goals were for the course and maybe bring in Bloom's taxonomy.
Oh, you're too nice. Yes, well, yes. He would say, are you, first, he might say, why are you giving that exam at all? Secondly, exactly. He would say, well, before we throw out the exam completely, let's go back to Bloom's and see if we're assessing what we want. So, well, I appreciate it. You did a great segue for my next slide, which is this question that Gannon says, which is an exam the best way to assess if, what, and how much learning has occurred in your course? So the first step, which we started to do when I asked you guys what your purpose was, is to clarify your purpose or learning objectives for your online exams. And learning objectives in many ways, levels of learning, right? Thinking about Bloom's, what level of learning or what content am I trying to teach? And then align that learning objective with and choose either a formative or a summative assessment. So you may not even need to give that final exam, kind of like Dennis was saying. Maybe if you want to measure certain things, you could do them in formative assessments. So formative assessments, if those of you haven't ever heard that term, are low stakes kind of learning in progress assessments that monitor student learning throughout the course, and they help instructors and students improve their learning in the process of it. I'm gonna give you some examples of those, but they help students identify their strengths and areas where they're struggling, and then you have the opportunity to close those learning gaps because they occur throughout the semester rather than just at like the end. And they're low stakes because they're usually not graded or they have a low credit or point value. We're primarily going to focus on summative assessments today because that was the prompt of the topic of final online proctored exams. But I wanted people to understand the difference because maybe in the end you won't even need a summative assessment. So what's summative assessments? Summative assessments are high stakes assessments of the culmination of learning in a unit or course. So think of them as evaluating the conclusion of learning. And they're almost always formally graded and they have high point or credit value. So your typical example of a summative assessment is a final exam. But decades of research is showing that students learn best from a mix of formative and summative assessments. And there are also a ton of alternative effective summative assessments for culminating a unit or course that are not a traditional proctored exam. They do have positives and negatives to them, but we will definitely want to consider those today. And in addition, a lot of these alternatives to exams often measure more of those upper levels of learning on Bloom's taxonomy better than exams, kind of like Dennis was saying. Also, they're often less stress-inducing, more equitable in that they don't exacerbate anxiety or the gender gap or accessibility issues, and they don't always require technology, right? Which overcomes the barriers to online proctored exams that we listed earlier. So that's where I want to turn us now to the workshop, is interrogating more your individual courses and your exams and getting y'all to kind of start to align your learning objectives with a formative or summative assessment and then maybe design an alternative. So, okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to show a slide now this slide is a worksheet. It's a copy of a worksheet, but I need to, well, look at me. I should have had this. I'm going to give you a copy of this worksheet actually in the chat as a Google Doc. Sorry, I should have had this on my desktop and I didn't. And what's going to happen is I turn it into a Google Doc that you can edit because I want all of you now, you're going to have time. I'm going to give you instructions in a second, but you're going to have time to now workshop, just like Dennis was saying, your individual course and your individual exams. So let me make sure I get the link here. And I'm copying and pasting. So right now, I'm copying and pasting into the into the chat. You should see a link to a Google Doc. And if you click on that, and I'm going to ask that you all click on that, you will now have your own copy of this slide as a worksheet. It's an editable Google Doc that all of you should be able to edit. And as you see, it's sort of like a decision tree of sorts, where, and I'm going to kind of go through these instructions here in the bottom left-hand corner and answer questions before we then start to dig into filling out these worksheets. So, so first what you want to do, as it says, is with the Google Doc, the editable doc, you will type in that white space there above this box here, the learning outcome for your online proctored exam, right? What's your purpose? And which levels of learning, according to Bloom's, do you want students to achieve? Then you follow the path for summative, or if you want to do formative, I'm okay with that, but assessment that aligns with your learning outcomes. And then you'll choose and design a new to you alternative summative, maybe formative assessment to the online proctored exams. And I've listed a bunch of these alternative assessments here in the blue. These are by no means all of them. Oh, I'm so sorry. I must have missed another hand raise. And I'm going to talk a couple of them right now. But Shalise, was your question answered?
Sorry. Everyone needs to make a copy of the doc and make their own copy, because then we're editing each other. Like, I noticed that on the doc already it says Spanish something.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I didn't think about that. Yes, thank you. So yes, please. Yes, what you have to do is save it. I think you need to save it and then save it on your hard drive, right, Shalise?
What you can do is, if you go down to the box and just say make a copy on file, and you go to make copy and you say entire presentation, rename it, and then you have your own presentation.
Okay, sure. There you go. Thank you. I appreciate that so much.
Right.
I already tried to problem solve the whole editable sharing thing, and I'm glad you just figured that out. So thank you. I think you could also just click save and then save it to your desktop too, but yeah. So perfect. So hold off on that. I'm so glad. I bet it was Erica who's in our Spanish program, is already filling it out. So hold on 1 second. Let me talk about this a bit more. We're going to have plenty of time. So, so you'll fill out this worksheet. And as I said, if you realize from your purpose statement that what you actually want is a formative assessment, then go for it. But I mostly focused on summative, right? Because we were talking about online proctored exams. Now, when I say new to you, what I mean is an assessment you've never tried before. For another faculty, it might be new, but to you or this specific course is new. So maybe it's even a summative assessment you tried for a different course. But really challenge yourself to pick something you haven't tried before. And as I said, I'm going to give you guys a good 10 or 15 minutes to fill this worksheet out on your own. And you may need to expand with additional notes. So I didn't put enough room. I had too much I wanted to put on the sheet for you to then start writing your notes on really what this summative assessment might look like. So if you end up picking, for instance, op-ed, please in your notes start fleshing that out even more. You know, this worksheet, there was only so much I can fit on it. And I think most of the alternative assessments in the blue column are self-explanatory, but I wanted to share a little bit about the ones about the essay exam, and then answer your questions before we begin. So see, for the essay exam, I have in parentheses, students generate questions, open notes, or reflect on learning outcomes. I want to explain those really quickly. The asking students to generate questions is clearly that wouldn't be like during the exam. That would be something you would do prior to the exam. And that's, again, to kind of overcome this challenge with cheating, right? It would be meaning the students kind of take ownership, and then they have confidence and less stress in it and don't feel the need to cheat because they've sort of been part of creating the exam. So I just wanted to explain that a little bit, and we can talk more about it. And again, think about how we're trying to overcome all those barriers we talked about with stress and accessibility. Okay, Yeah, just click download and save. Yeah, that's what I was thinking is the best idea. Thank you, Eugene. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, the other example about if I said allowing use of notes if it's a timed essay. So again, this is a way to overcome some of the barriers you guys mentioned about accessibility or that technology glitches happen when students were being proctored or having time constraints. And then the last thing I have there in parentheses about reflecting on learning outcomes. So one idea, all of this comes from the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, by the way, I didn't make any of this up. And one interesting idea is to think about how your essay exam actually would not only ask students questions about concepts, but would ask them to do the work of reflecting on how they learned those concepts. So that's what I mean by reflection on the learning outcome. It would require them to reflect on the learning outcome for the assessment. So you could have a lot of your questions about your content and then actually have a question on the essay exam that says, tell me how you learned X, Y, and Z, right? What did you learn to some of you said to study, right? What was your process of learning this concept? And it will depend on your learning outcomes. So research shows if students are asked to reflect on and articulate what they learned and how they learned, then they're actually more likely to learn it too. So a reflection on how we learn actually helps us retain data. And as I mentioned, all of these come from the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, and many of them in the blue can get at Bloom's higher orders of learning, such as the report of a case study, right? That's application. Or the infographic and poster, that's a create. Or the op-ed, that's evaluate. So they go beyond recall and retention and understanding. So let me open it up for questions before we start to work individually on our worksheets. Any questions? Okay, so y'all will have a good about 10 or 15 minutes to work on this worksheet. For some reason, I keep missing the hand raises. I am so sorry. But I'm going to sit here and please, write a question in the chat or raise your hand and just speak up with a question if I can help you as you are filling out this worksheet.
Hi, Jamie. Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, if we're already doing these formative assessments as well as the exams and classes, because the way that our classes are set up, very often we end up having a certain number of items and each one's worth 10 or 15 points out of 100. And what you end up having is a set of quizzes, a set of daily discussions, a set of peer review papers that students are getting credit for, plus an exam. So do you want us to say anything about how those connect? Or, I wouldn't say an exam replaces any of those formative assessments. Does that make sense?
So your question is?
In the class where I'm talking about the quiz
Okay.
on this particular worksheet,
Yeah.
I also do daily discussions. I also do peer reviews of papers.
So
okay.
So you can just ignore the formative assessment part of the decision tree. Like that was for me if someone was in a situation where they had a summative assessment, a final online exam, and they're realizing their learning outcome doesn't need to be summative and that they could go in that direction. Does that make sense?
Okay, thanks.
Yeah,
okay.
You don't need to go in that direction. And really for the workshop today, I wanted us to focus on summative anyway. But it could be that someone's realizing from this activity, I don't even really need a final exam, So, but in your case, it sounds like you do, although that's what you'll flesh out. What is the difference about your online final exam?
Yeah, especially when teaching online, for example, with classes like eCore, there's a set of quizzes, a set of discussions, a set of papers that students have to do, and then the exam itself can only be worth 15%, no more, because they don't want everything to be about the exam. They don't want everything to be about the summative.
Yeah, they want informative. Yep. So, okay. So, but I would still, maybe you want to choose not an eCore course and to focus on since they have more guidelines and maybe one of your other courses.
Oh, sure, yeah. I mean, I find that I still apply a lot of those principles in the other classes I teach at VSU. Yeah.
Definitely.
Because they developed it with Quality Matters and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Great. Yep. Great. And thanks you all for problem solving and downloading of the PowerPoint worksheet. Oh, and I will say, after we work for about 10 or 15 minutes on our own, we're going to have time to share with each other. So, because I want us to clearly bring this workshop full circle and learn ideas from each other, just like we heard from Christine. Now we'll work for about 3 to 5 more minutes, and then we'll have a good 15 or so minutes, a little less than 15 minutes to share with each other. So just giving you a heads up to kind of at least wind down a little bit what you're working on for the next few minutes. Okay, so I'd love us to have this good 15 minutes now to share your outcomes of working on this worksheet, right? What was new to you, and how are you going to maybe implement an alternative assessment to an online proctored exam after you kind of worked through this worksheet? And I'd love for us, instead of using the chat now, to raise our hands and share out loud, and please turn on your video too, if that's okay with you, because I'm going to actually take away this screen, and I'd love us to kind of almost feel like we're in a room together, and now we're really sharing, right, our strategies and our ideas with each other. So I understand if you still want to keep your camera off, or something like that happens, but it'd be great, especially if you're speaking, to turn on your camera. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this screen, this PowerPoint slide, and just now open it up to y'all to share and brainstorm with each other. So let me stop sharing, and so we'll start seeing each other's videos. So yeah, Shalise, go ahead.
So it's really interesting because costume history, it's the only course where I do not ask students to create. Like everything else is all about the top of Bloom's taxonomy because we're in the creation zone of theater. And so I was like, wow, that's really sad that all I want them to do is remember things. So I'm trying to move above just remember, because that's what all my tests were last semester is essentially there was a picture and they had to, I guess, a little identify. They had to identify what time period garment was called. Really, they were just memorizing. So I was working on something, and I love this opportunity to share that it's called a term description paper. And essentially what they would do is they would take an article of clothing from a time period we're discussing, say the Steinkirk, which is a neck thing worn by men in the 1700s, and they would have to come up with the country of origin, the history of the garment, the purpose of the garment, what material is made of, what is used in, what colors were they typically, and then talk about the socioeconomic, religious, military station of the garment, then also identify terms they didn't, and then source their information. And so I'm trying to make them like think about clothing in a more in-depth way, and I had them assigned as they would do one for each time period. But now I'm wondering, as I listen to this presentation, if it's something that can replace my final, where it's just slides and slides and slides of garment that every piece of garment that we studied, and they just label them. Like, I'm trying to figure out, is that a good replacement for that is up on a higher scale than just like regurgitating facts?
Yeah, so I'll open it up to your colleagues here. And again, if you guys can turn on your videos so we can not just be blank talking heads, that'd be great. I will model that as well. So go ahead. Does anyone want to jump in? So I think one thing I can share that Shalise noticed was that she realized her final exam was just testing recall, and that's not actually the learning objective she wants to measure. So I at least heard that from Shalise. And now you're kind of like, okay, but so now how do I do a summative assessment that measures the higher orders? Maybe an exam that asks them to create a new case study or something, it sounds like. Others? Come on, y'all, help your colleagues here. Sure, Christine, go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, how you doing? It's good to see you all. I was deciding what I would do with my fundamentals of philosophy class. The normal way that I test in that class is to have students answer 5 essay questions within 2 hours, and it's meant to be a way for them to show their understanding of certain key concepts within philosophy. So what I think I'll try and do next time, I went ahead and I edited my document. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but I'll read it to you. And inside the document, I decided that instead of doing a traditional final exam with those essay questions, I'd have them do an oral presentation that would be summative, in which they would be showing their understanding of certain key terms. And one of our learning outcomes for that class is to become conversant with the history of philosophy, especially empiricism, materialism, idealism, rationalism, pragmatism, and existentialism. So I could have them do a PowerPoint presentation where they would show that they understood what each of those terms meant and which philosopher would be categorized in which of those terms.
Awesome. And guess what? You've now eliminated the dealing with proctoring, the dealing with tech issues. It's generally pretty easy to upload a PowerPoint, and present a PowerPoint. You've eliminated the exacerbation of inequity, right? With accessibility, you can make your PowerPoint accessible, and gender and racial gaps. And then, as you said, you're still aligning with your learning outcomes, right? With still kind of testing content and retention of content. And you probably will enjoy that more. Maybe. I enjoy presentations better than, just an exam that's graded, but that's my personal experience. Great. Can I have someone else share? Sure, Eugene, go ahead.
Well, I have 37. That would be the majors, the juniors, and it is the teacher candidates must understand how learners grow and develop. They must understand the central concepts, tools of inquiry, and structure of the discipline, which is health and physical education. And then they should be able to connect the concepts and use different perspectives to engage the learners in critical thinking, creativity, and collaboration for problem solving. And I assign them readings, and even in addition to the lectures every week. So at the end, I'm going to still maintain it's not going to be proctored, but they would still have some type of online multiple choice questions so that they can remember the concepts and be able to understand. And at the end, they would write something similar to a TPA, which is an impact on student learning. Um, they will be able to analyze using either a whole class or pick one student, the age, and apply in terms of the concepts, how that age they grow and develop, and come up with maybe a makeup lesson that they would um, teach. And that way they'll be able to apply all the concepts.
Awesome, Eugene. Okay, so what I loved about what you did is you retained some of the multiple choice exam components of retention and recall. Again, Kevin Gannon is not saying we shouldn't, test for lower levels of learning, but if our learning objectives are to go higher than that, then we need to think differently about our assessments. So I really liked, Eugene, that you now are kind of doing a little bit of both, and then as a result moving away from the proctoring and the kind of traditional exam format, where now it's a little more of like a multiple choice and an essay kind of case study memo version, at least. Yeah, and I know what you mean by the EdTPA, that they have to write these proposals and these practice plans.
They just did away with that. So.
Oh, they did? Oh, okay. Well, what did you mean by that then? When you said you're going to have them, maybe I misunderstood that.
Prior to that, we had something similar to that. And when the TPA came, they had specifications in terms of 15 rubrics that they have to cover or show in a narrative or in a series of narratives.
Yeah, okay.
So something similar to that, but in this case, you want it to be more practical in terms of application.
Yeah.
Ingenuity, creativity from the students, because they would have acquired the remembering, understanding, and they'll go to apply. Now they're going to the higher, if you talk about Bloom's taxonomy, they'll be analyze and evaluate at that end.
Awesome.
So
cool. Okay. Great. Another example, someone else, and you can even share something you're struggling with, like Shalise was sort of still struggling. Dennis, yeah, go ahead.
Hi, it's Dennis here from Mass Media. Normally, I don't have a lot of final exams because I teach video production classes, and I want the kids to put their efforts into that. I do have it in my screenwriting class. I did teach an online video production class this summer, and I suppose that in online exams, I could play a PSA, public service announcement, a short film, or even have them read a short scene and have them evaluated by certain parameters. I guess that would be everything but create on Bloom's taxonomy. It would be the bottom 5 pieces. I've done that in the past, but I got away with it. Perhaps I'll do it in the future.
Oh yeah, Dennis, definitely, right? I think that all fits into sort of the presentation, and in your case, it's a more video multimedia version. Definitely, yeah, for the students to kind of present products, and you can either do that synchronously, so then they present them during a synchronous video conference for the final, or you could just have them upload them, right, and then asynchronously everybody watches them. So that definitely would fit for online.
Well, if I do it synchronously, it might be rather high pressure. Here's a movie, analyze it, go.
That's true.
On and some will not, but I'll deal with that.
Yeah, but I'm wonderful. I'm glad you're thinking through that. Oh, yes, Sandy, go ahead.
About 15 years ago, Richard Carter, who's on this particular workshop with us, handed over a class called The Natural History of Georgia, and I've been teaching it. And I'll be going through a lot of content on ecological principles, but I've been learning how to use electronic journaling, and they're going to be doing some electronic journaling. So at the end, I was just thinking, because you pushed us to say do something different, that I'm going to assign each one of them an ecosystem, and then they have to apply the set of principles that we've been going over in ecology and put together either a PowerPoint or a poster that they can present online to their classmates. So it'll push them at the end to apply a lot of the concepts that we've been doing, and they really have to create, because they'll have to go in and get Google images and create a very visual display. So I'll see. They'll probably scream blood harder, but whatever.
No, that's a great idea. And you know, the tricky thing is sometimes these other kinds of assessments, you have to make sure to create careful rubrics for them, figure out how to grade them differently, kind of like Eugene was saying, but I know you know how to do that, Sandy. So as long as you're clear
I hate analytic rubrics, though.
Well, I don't even mean it has to be a point system rubric, but I mean, that's the tricky thing sometimes when going to alternative assessments. You just still want to make sure that you're, you know, being equitable in how you grade or evaluate them for each student. But
okay,
yeah. Wonderful. Okay, we have time, I think, for one more. So someone else who shared what was new to you that you learned from this webinar and or you might apply to one of your courses this fall. Duke or Erica?
Duke will go. I'm talking about theater appreciation class, and it's for majors. It's not for just the general population. And I have done a group project in the past instead of a cumulative final, where we take a production currently running, ideally in New York, where there's lots of news coverage and things like that, and then generate a presentation about everything we've covered in the class, from concept to the creation to the marketing, all of those things. But I've got a big class, and there aren't like 45 plays in the last couple of years that would kind of fit that. And I was wondering if small group is appropriate for something like that.
So that is one challenge that you'll want to make sure with some of these assessments is not to increase your workload, right, with evaluating them. So that is definitely one kind of downside to a lot of these other alternative assessments. But that was kind of why I was talking to Sandy about having rubrics. Sometimes rubrics can help with the managing of the workload. You know, you can also have students do peer critiques, and then that reduces your ability to have to kind of closely grade everybody. That's one strategy I've done, for instance, even in public speaking classes. Students do peer critiques of each other, and then that pretty much ends up, and then I just add additional comments, and I'm done with grading. You know, it goes a lot quicker. No matter what size class you have or the number of presentations or, like you said, group projects you will have. So I don't know if other people want to share. I know we're right at time, but for me, using peer assessment helps offload the workload for the faculty member.
Cool, thank you. And that's a new thing for me.
In BlazeView? Is there a way that you can set it up in BlazeView?
Yeah, I mean, you don't even have to have them show it visible to each other. You can just have them submit it to you. And then it doesn't even have to be like, it could be almost like anonymous peer assessment. Like, so they don't see it from their peer, they get credit for it, but then you just use it to more quickly grade stuff.
Okay.
Does that make sense? But
thanks.
Gary, you have an idea?
A question, does anyone have any idea of a tool out there to use like that to anonymize an essay or paper that can be sent out to other students, almost like when we submit academic peer-reviewed articles?
Well, go ahead, someone else jump in.
Well, if I wanted to do that, I would have them submit a paper to me that I wanted to know that they did. I'd have them submit a paper to me and not put their names on it in the BlazeView assignment box. and then I would take it and put it in another file and then resend it to the whole class, and that way it would be anonymous and I'd know they did it, and it wouldn't show who had done it when the whole class gets it. If that's what you're asking, I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's what I currently do. I was just wondering if there was some more automated way to do that, or if
A
there's
quicker way. So Gary, that would be a good question to ask the e-learning staff, because you're right, there may be some like checkbox to click to make something more private or something, and then make it a little faster. Not always, as we discover with BlazeView, but okay. I want to make sure if there's any last questions on something that was new to you that you learned from the webinar. I mean, maybe even you weren't aware of the difference between formative and summative assessments, or you kind of came to the realization that, like Shalise was saying, like, I don't even want to give this final exam. It's really not even measuring kind of my goal for the cumulative learning in this course. So I'd love someone to kind of share one last thought. Maybe Linda or Erica. I'm going to pick on you guys because I know you well. Who's laughing? Is that Erica?
Hi.
Yeah, go ahead, Erica. Yeah, share with us.
Sorry, I was laughing because I'm having problems with technology, and this is what we are talking about. Okay, so I have used both formative and summative assessments in my Spanish classes. And yes, I love all the ideas, but still I have a concern. For example, in Spanish, our students need to feel confident or gain confidence of speaking. However, when we have fun videos or whatever, they end up reading. So I finally gave up and I allowed them to read this past semester, but it was theater. But then what I did was like, can you reflect on that? So, but you have 1 minute. And just because I said that, students were very spontaneous and I got them to speak spontaneously. And it was just amazing just to create the situations or the opportunities where they just free themselves, and, just by saying, because they still care about the numbers. So I said, it's just for credit or no credit. So,
yeah,
but just,
awesome.
Yeah,
you reduced the anxiety, right? About you made it more of a formative and reduced the anxiety about the credit. And then what I actually love is you did, I didn't have time to delve into it, but a lot of the research on kind of, I didn't put it in there, but you can have an oral final exam, where it's kind of like back when we all got our masters or our dissertations and we did an oral defense. And that's kind of what you're talking about. You had them almost just do an impromptu kind of oral, on the spot, even though they prepared for it, final, which is, but lower stakes too. So that's really cool. Yeah. I didn't put on the list like oral final exam because I didn't want everyone to freak out from having memories about their dissertation defense, at least in my case. But so the key would be to make it not more anxiety producing, like you said, like an oral impromptu, experience. Very cool. That's definitely an alternative idea. Well, I want to be mindful of time, and I just want to say thanks everyone for signing up for and joining the webinar. I hope you found it helpful. I did record the session, and we'll be uploading the recording in our BlazeView 101 webinar module. So please encourage your colleagues to check it out and watch. And you probably don't know this, but actually the deans and department heads picked a bunch of the webinars, well, 3 of them that they really thought were important, and they thought this was one of them. And so we built in a quiz in the BlazeView module for faculty who can't attend the synchronous session to have documentation that they also go through it. So all of you guys, I'm going to document you as registered and attendees in the EOD training portal, and that will go into your APL Next Ed. But for your colleagues who can't make the actual synchronous webinar, they will now be able to watch it and take a quiz and hopefully be able to get documentation and learn from this. So glad the worksheet will help you. Please follow up with any questions, and everyone have a great day. So thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thanks for everything, Jamie.
Yeah, bye.